Welcome to Don't Check It Up, the podcast where we help students and families navigate the wild journey of the college search and applying to colleges without breaking a sweat. I'm your host, Chuck, and today we are talking about resources for LGBTQAI students. And as always, I love bringing in a guest and an expert on this topic. So today, my guest is Scott Garbini. Scott Garbini is a fellow independent educational consultant like myself, and he is with Garbini Education and Career Consulting, career counseling. Oh, man. So welcome to the show, Scott, now that I totally screwed up the name of your company.
Not a problem. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you being here. We have known each other for a very long time, and I'm so glad that we finally got an opportunity to sit down and talk about a very important topic. But before we dive into this topic, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers?
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. My name is Scott Garbini, and all right, just to give you a little bit about myself, I would say that my career path to get to where I am has been anything but linear. I am your quote-unquote non-traditional student in the sense that the traditional college setting wasn't for me, and I did not know that. I did not have a consultant when I was going to college, so I had to kind of figure things out myself, and I did what I like to call a gap year at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I learned what not to do as a college student. Ended up having to have, some very deep conversations with my family. What I chose to end up doing was started looking at things that were of interest to me, unique skills that I had and things that I like to do. And what I realized is I love to cook. So I decided to go to Johnson & Wales in Rhode Island. Let me rephrase that. They accepted me and I chose to go there. And fast forward, what I found was that during that time, I found out about myself because college wasn't just that place to learn about how to become a chef. I learned who I was. I came out during those college years. It was transformative for me in a lot of different reasons. But what it did is it also taught me about the intricacies of this process of looking into college. And when you are somebody who identifies as LGBTQIA or anything other than the traditional quote unquote student that we're used to, there are different nuances that we have to work through when we're looking for a good fit. So ultimately graduated, worked for Johnson & Wales for a few years, working with students who had learning differences. A lot of personal growth happened during that time as well. And ultimately, after a few years, more than a few years, probably like 10 years of working in admissions, I ended up actually going into politics. I was on the board of education and I opened my own business at the same time, really focusing on LGBTQIA plus students and that journey, as well as students with different learning differences and how that would look for them as well when they go to college. And that's kind of how I got to where I'm at now.
I was going to say, what an amazing story and what a great journey. And I think it's really beneficial for students and parents to, again, hear, as time and time again, my guests have reiterated that the path is rarely linear. None of us who are independent educational consultants went to college to become independent educational consultants, but it's because of our journeys through college and life after college that we go, hey, we've learned a bit. We should be able to help some students and some parents, especially you and I having admissions background and being able to see, quote unquote, how the sausage is made, and then being able to help students and parents navigate that process. Now, I am not a writer. I have never proclaimed to be. I am much more better at speaking and doing these video shows and podcasts, but you are definitely a writer, and you have recently put out a book called Transition While Transitioning, and it really dives into the student experience. So what inspired you to write this book, and what do you hope readers will take from it?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for that, because I do not consider myself a writer. I hate writing, and this was first off an experience that I just never, is not what I thought it was going to be in any way, shape, or form as far as the actual writing of a book. You don't just start with the title and end at the very end. I learned very quickly. But the reason for the book, it came about because of things that were happening in our geopolitical landscape back in 2017, when things were not so great in the world, and LGBTQI plus rights were starting to get brought back on the chopping block. So I really looked at some of my students and the challenges that they faced and the families when their child was looking for or selecting that college, getting there and realizing, oh, this is not a good fit, for a multitude of reasons. And it generally wasn't the academic piece. Sometimes it was, but it really was about that personal transition. And there was no resources for parents to look at or for students to look at to say that identified as LGBTQ. What should I really be researching when I'm on this process? What are the questions that I need to ask that I may not be told, but I'm seeing with my eyes? I'm noticing that the school says they're LGBTQI plus friendly, but I haven't seen one LGBTQ person on this tour. They haven't mentioned where any of the clubs are or any of the offices that I would need to be. So I thought this is a very good opportunity to write a resource for students and families. And that's what I really wanted to be, because as you know very well, Chuck, parents, the adults, students, the children are not always worried about the same things.
Right.
An example is, I had a parent contact me. They were very concerned about their child's hormone treatment and their child moving away to college, and how are they going to get the hormone medication transferred down there when right now in the state where this particular child is going, it could be considered child abuse if you're doing that. And they had to have long conversations with each other, but really, what was that going to look like? Were we going to have to fly home every time we needed to get a prescription? Was I putting myself in legal peril by doing something like that? And it's obviously there's going to be a second edition at some point, because things have already changed so much since I put the book out that there's a lot of updates that are already coming. But that was really my main focus, was providing a resource for students who the college process is the same as far as the nuts and bolts of it. But what are we actually looking for? What supports do we need? Who are those people that I, as an LGBTQI person, can go to and say, I'm having a rough day, or I may not even know. I may know that there's something going on, but where am I going to go to school that they're going to help me explore that and really develop personally and academically, because it's obviously you're going to college for a reason, and that is to learn, but also to grow and learn about yourself and where do you fit in this world that we are now. So that was really my basis of writing the book.
I think it's awesome. I also think it's great that you provide this as a free resource on your website. So you don't have to go to your major bookstore to try and find this. You just have to go to Scott's website, which will be highlighted in the show notes for today's episode. So go to his website and check out this resource. And it really is a resource for students, for parents, and for counselors that are working with students who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and a host of other identities, because there is a lot of things that change between the high school experience and the college experience. I think this resource is helpful also for students who may not be out in high school and who are now planning to reinvent themselves, so to speak, when they go off to college and be a new person and be their true self, their authentic self, when they go to college, because maybe that was harder to do when they were in high school. So now that is part of the college search process. As you said, the search process itself is the same, but there's this kind of added layer of complexity, because you have to look at not only the college or the university, but also the location, the state, the laws, the resources. There's a whole lot of things that may impact the student and the parents want their kids to be safe. So this acts as a resource to help students and parents navigate those things in really one compact thing. So that's great. I love that you specialize in supporting LGBTQAI students. What are some of those unique challenges that they face as they go through this college process?
Right now, walking out their door on a daily basis is honestly a challenge that they face because of the onslaught of negativity towards this population, but towards my family, I will say, as I identify, I'm as LGBTQ, I'm married to a man. And just to kind of go back a little bit about the book and being a free resource, that was one of the reasons why I did this, is I did not want to bring a lot of attention right now to it. I wanted this to be a resource where people could find it and not have to worry about being targeted, or then even myself being targeted for writing the book.
Right.
But really, I wanted my students and parents and families to be able to download this almost like the underground, send it far and wide, get it out there for people to use. But some of the unique challenges I think that we're facing, and again, this changes on a daily basis. So my students that I'm working with, we are constantly reading up on policies at schools. What does their housing policy look like? What is their healthcare access, not just at the school, but in the state that you might be moving to, because that is not something we actually really have to take into account. Your name and pronoun usage, anti-discrimination protections. What are the policies at those schools say, and are they following those policies? And I've said to families, like, you're going to go on campus. And when we started this process, we were talking about DEI and going into these offices where you're going to feel safe and a part of the community. Well, guess what? Those people are still here.
Right.
They just may not be in the DEI office. So we're having to reevaluate cultures on campuses and actually find out what is the vibe. As you, I'm sure, do this as well, I will never have a student go to a campus without visiting. I don't want to say never. There's reasons,
Rare.
but very rare. I want you to go. I want you to not just go on a tour. I want you to walk around campus. I want you to look. I want you to listen. I want you to really see, like, what is the vibe on campus? What is the student experience like? Not just what admissions is saying, because as you know, we've worked in admissions, we pay our students to say what we want them to say.
Yeah.
So when you're walking around, perfect example, student of mine touring a school, went in, got to sit in on a class. They were going through the names. The professor said, what is your name? They said, this is my preferred name. The professor used that name for the duration of the course. That is something nowadays that we have to talk about, because some instructors may be against it. Their policies at the school may not say, your name is whatever is legally coming across my desk, and that's it. So a lot of different challenges that we're facing. A lot of it is sometimes I have to, what is the battle we're really looking to fight right now? Because there's going to be bigger battles that we're going to have to fight. And right now, is this worth the energy that you're putting into the fact that on this one obscure form that nobody's ever going to see again, you have to put your given name or your dead name, depending on which term you use, versus I'm going to fight this because I'm not going to put my dead name. This is my real name, and it's what I'm going to use. So it's very tailored to individuals, because what is a concern for one family might not be for another family. Yep. So for me right now, and for my students, is we need to look at what's happening at federal, state, local, and campus levels. And those are all built into our research. And I always say, I don't care what's happening at the federal government. You need to.
You do now.
Because right now, these laws are affecting you personally. Before we could say it's not happening, it's just being at the 10,000 foot view. No, now this is going to impact your daily life.
Right.
And what does that look like? And again, and what are you going to do when you're faced with a situation where a teacher dead names you, or you're walking around the neighborhood of your campus and somebody calls you a derogatory word, which is going to happen. It's the world we live in, and that's going to happen at your own home. That can happen in your high school. But really, how do you work with that? How do you then grow from that and say, you know what? It hurts, but that's not me. That's you. And that's something that you've got to work on yourself. But I'm saying this as an experienced 47-year-old man who just doesn't care anymore and won't take crap from somebody. When you're a 17, 18-year-old young adult and you're looking at a college, the last place you want to be is where somebody's going to call you a derogatory name for the next 4 years of your life. Right. So is it ever going to be perfect? No, we will find this type of behavior anywhere we go in the world. What we have to do is find a place where, you know what, if it does happen, this is what they're going to do to protect you. And not only protect you, but they're going to have some form of process that doesn't just support you, but also teaches the other individual, like, hey, that may not be appropriate, and here's why. And sometimes it is literally in our conversations. I've done it, saying he versus she when I'm talking to students sometimes, and if you've known them one way versus another, and you have to get used to me saying I'm sorry and not doing it again. But my students also, I try and teach them that fortitude to be able to say, that didn't feel good, but this is life and this is how I'm going. And the school is there to help lift me up and bring me to that next level where I can say, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. So a lot of unique challenges that we're facing with everybody. But for our LGBTQ students, I would say, what are the policies that are coming down from the federal government and how is that impacting the campus you're looking at? And also, what is the culture on campus? And that for me is probably the biggest one that a student can see right off the bat. And we all know, you walk onto a campus and you feel like you belong there, or you turn around and they sit in mom and dad's car, they say, I'm not going back on that campus again. And it could be for whatever reason. But if you then as a parent start talking, and this is where when we're working with our LGBTQ students, parents, you might have to have some conversations that you didn't think you were going to have.
Yep.
But you are the adults now. And these are serious safety questions that we need to at least make our youth aware of. This could be something that you might potentially come across in college, and you need to be able to handle this and understand, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of that. We can get into more of that if you'd like. But that's sort of right now, those are
just a few small things. And I want to circle back and really help students and parents think about that. I want the student, and I think you agree with me, that I want the student to focus on how do they feel about the academic and the social fit. And this might be an area where the parents and counselors who are listening are helping with kind of the legal fit. And we as independent educational consultants can help families navigate, okay, what states, what schools, colleges, universities already have these policies in place, because it is a lot to research. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to hire someone, but when you're going through this college search process and application process with a student who identifies as LGBTQAI, something like this, there are some additional questions you need to be asking, and you need to be checking your resources, as you said, at the federal, state, local, and institutional levels. And that's where someone like Scott or myself can really help. And counselors who are listening, this is an area to be educated in so that parents and students are thinking about this. And I don't want to stress students out of like, okay, I'm already trying to find the college that fits. Now I have to think about all these other layers. It is going to be a factor, but this is where parents can help. This is where counselors can help so that the student can really focus on, do I enjoy the academics, the social life, the location? But these are questions that really need to be thought about through. And I love how you've written so much about inclusivity, and you talked a little bit about it, about making sure that we're addressing students the way they would like to be called. I'll share my own story, is that I distinctly remember it was my first year of college, and the roster is there, and they're reading through the names, and my legal name is Charles, but because the way the roster was printed, it came out as CHARL, and then it was like, that was the end of it. And the professor thought it was Charlene and asked for, is there a Charlene here? And I was just like, what's the last name? They're like, Erickson. And I was like, that's me, it's Charles, and I go by Chuck. And the professor was so like flabbergasted and shocked and like embarrassed and just going, oh, that's never happened before. Like, oh, I didn't even think it could be Charles. I haven't had a Charles. Oh, why did I call you Charlene? And just like totally guilted himself all at that one moment in time. And I said, it's fine. You can call me Charles or you can call me Chuck. Most people call me Chuck, but whatever you feel comfortable with. And that was the first time I've ever experienced that, where someone called me by a name that was close but not correct. And I was just like, okay, that was a little weird. So it can happen to students.
I was gonna say, you have to sit there and go, is it me that he's talking about? Like, until you hear the last name, it's like, I know there's no Charlene in here, so it must be me. So you have to like,
right.
what is the last name that you are talking about? And that's where it's like, okay, you're talking about me. So yeah.
Yeah, so I get it. So even if you don't identify as trans or gender non-conforming, like you might be called by a name that's not correct, and then it's going to make you feel a little bit awkward for the day. And clearly that was a moment that stuck out to me, because it's still in my brain to this day. A couple decades later. So it is something that we have to be aware of as adults to help our young people as they become their selves, whatever they want to be called. And a lot of us go through name changes, whether you identify as gender nonconforming, trans, or just as a human, some of my friends used to be called Mike, and now they're called Michael, and they want to be called Michael rather than Mike. And so we as adults have to help role model that. And I love that you talked about your inclusivity and how does your advocacy really intersect with what you are doing as an independent educational consultant?
Um, well, those of you that know me know I'm advocating at any given time for students. I'm out protesting. I'm doing what I can. Right now, where I've found my biggest impact can be made in advocating is in policy writing for things that I do. So I'm on a few different boards. One of them is our local board of education here, and the policies that I write, I make sure that when we're looking at them, that we are making sure we are inclusive of all students, whether you are first gen, LGBTQAI, white, brown, black, it does not matter. If you are a student in our district, we are inclusive of everybody, including our staff, including our teachers. And so it's part of who I am. I don't, that's a tough one to answer for me because I can look back and my mom said, like, she remembers the first time that she knew that I was different was because I was watching something on TV and I think Tiananmen Square was happening and I was crying and I just couldn't understand how this could happen to people in their own country. And it just didn't set. And since then, I've always been for the underdog in whatever I do. So for me, advocacy is a word. But for me, it's what I actually do. So everything, when we're looking at things, we are looking at it from an inclusive lens. Like, is this inclusive to everybody? And sometimes for me, I will get a client that might have different political views as I do. Doesn't make a difference. That's not my job.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to help you find a place where you will be successful. So that advocacy sometimes has to turn from what I might normally be advocating for, because I'm now advocating for this client that I'm working for to make sure that they're getting that experience. So I look at it from all aspects of things. Sometimes I have to take my own and categorize it over here because it is not about me. Mom and dad, you may not want to hear this either, but it's not always about you either. This is about the fit for your child and making sure that they're going to go to a place where they're going to grow and learn. And for me, that's the advocating piece. I advocate for anybody that is trying to achieve something that is going to help them, but not hurt others. And that's where I have a lot of the conversations. Like, advocacy is helping, is going out and doing things and or not even being at the front on a protest line or whatever it might be, but you're working at your school and you're helping them create a policy because they don't have one, or you're helping them set up a center on campus, or at your local high school, you're opening a GLAD program because it's there, or they don't have one, and you're trying to do that. So for me, that advocacy piece is embedded sort of into everything I do. And I'm trying to pass that on to my students as well. As, listen, not only do you have to learn how to advocate for yourself, but you might have to advocate for others at some point in your life. And that's not a bad thing. That is good to know that, hey, because of what I said, this person now has a better chance at XYZ. Or because I opened my mouth and I stood up, this person isn't being bullied anymore, or this person isn't whatever it might be. They're not being talked down to by a teacher because of where they grew up, or because of the color of their skin, or any of those types of things. If you want to be treated a certain way, then you have to mimic that behavior. And it goes back to what you said, as adults, when we're doing stuff, students are going to mimic what we do. We have to be the role models. So for me, that advocacy piece works. It goes with my students. I hope they take it on when they go. And for the most part, I hear that a lot of my students are doing advocacy of some kind, shape, or form. Whatever you're passionate about and whatever you can advocate for. And I remember my dad saying numerous times, as I'm sure those of you that are listening or watching this can tell, I like to talk. And my dad told me once, your mouth is either going to get you in prison, become a lawyer, or a politician. The first two things I never did. The politician I did. And now, like you, I get paid to talk. And if I have the ability to make an impact for the better in anybody's life, in any way that I'm speaking, talking, writing a policy for somebody or for a district or whatever it might be, then that's what I was meant to do. And so for me, advocating was writing this book. and then giving it out as a resource, because it's helping families and parents, or families, students, and counselors advocate for what they want. And what does that even look like? We may not know. So there's a resource now that you can take and go with that.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate your insights on that, and really reinforcing that both in your professional work and in your, personal work and everything that you are doing. In your book, which is called Transition While Transitioning, again, that's available on your website, and you have to go to the shop. So if you're wondering where to find the book, you kind of go to the shop, and it's the only thing in the shop. The great part about it is that it is free. So when you go to the shop, you're going to see that it did have a price, but right now it is currently free. So in your book, Transition While Transitioning, you really talk about this stress and this decision fatigue and the pressure that students are feeling right now. How can families help with this, and how can you help with this, and how does this, what are some recommendations that you have for the stress and decision fatigue and and all of the pressure that students are feeling right now?
Take a deep breath. It's the first thing, both the parents and the students. This process should not be a stress-inducing process. This should be a time of angst, but a time of growth and happiness and decision-making, and that next step. And we have students today that are worried and caring more than I know I ever did when I was a student. The political tensions that are going on, social pressures, constant comparisons, we're not going to get on the topic of whether it's right or wrong, but social media, and the fact that if you're somebody with a famous last name that starts with a K, that if you can go and do this, if they can do it, you can do it as well.
Right.
Those are pressures that we never had. My pressures were get outside and play with your Hot Wheels in the yard and don't come until the lights went off. Nowadays, kids are worried about their future. They're not just stressed. What I'm seeing is that they're overwhelmed. We are testing, we are requesting, we are adding, we are doing so much to our students, to our kids' schedules, and we are not giving them the time to just be a kid and just relax for a minute. So what I would say parents can do, and what families can do right now during this process, during these few years in high school before they go into college, and then really when they're in college and you switch from being the sort of driver to now sitting by and watching your child drive, and oh my God, they're hitting the curbs and they're doing it. But you know what? They're doing it. My biggest thing right now, listen. Don't just listen, but listen. Look at your child. What are they saying, and what is happening on their face? Are they saying everything is fine? Because when I say everything is fine, nothing is fine. The world is coming apart. So if you're really trying to help your child through this process, and maybe your child hasn't even come out to you yet, and you have an idea and you're wondering and you want to ask that question, don't. When your child is ready to come out to you or to come out to wherever they want, they will. But there are also questions that you can ask if you're listening that will help you in this process. So for example, I'm looking for a campus mom where I will be accepted for who I am. Great. Tell me about that. Who are you? Who would you like to be? Where do you see yourself going? Now, if you see your child kind of do this, let them go on. Don't pry. Don't do things. Because right now, what we're doing is we're listening. We're trying to understand when they say, I want a school that's accepting. And again, I don't know how many students I've ever heard say accepting. They usually say, I want to find a place where everybody's going to like me. It's generally what I get. Okay, great. So you want an accepting campus where everybody's going to like you. Well, first we need to talk about not everybody's going to like you, and that's just in life, and you have to learn that. But what does that mean? And as a parent, asking some of these questions, not from the I'm challenging you aspect, but that sounds amazing. Tell me, what does that look like for you? Where do you see yourself going? And if they say, I don't know, don't freak out, mom and dad. It is okay. we put so much pressure on young adults that, again, and Chuck and I are sitting here, we said this at the beginning, we did not go to school for this.
No.
Most of you that are going to be watching this probably did not go to school for what you're doing as a profession. It helped and it got you where it is. So I want a student and I want a parent to really think about, where am I going to get all of the skills that I need? Now, I do get the students that come in, I want to be an engineer, I'm going into computer science, I want to be a doctor. Okay, there are specific paths you have to go on to do these. But for the most part, students that I'm working with are kind of like, college is that next step where I'm going to learn. So as a parent, as a family, and I apologize in advance because I also want to say some students don't have families. So if you're the person working with students, guiding them, mentoring them, listen and really focus on what they're trying to tell you, because a lot of times students are saying or children are saying what we want to hear because they know how to play this game. So
yes,
throw them that curveball when they say, I want a place that's accepting. Just say, oh, great, here's a school you should look at. Tell me, what does that look like for you? What does acceptance mean to you? And help them figure out what that means. Sometimes they're just regurgitating what they've heard a counselor say to them or a teacher. You want to find a place that's accepting for you. Okay, well, what does that mean? Accepting for me is going to be totally different than accepting for you versus Chuck. We all have different meanings of what acceptance is. So let's unpack that a little bit. But also, as a counselor for college consulting, you have to remember, I'm not a therapist. So there are questions that you might ask that I say, you know, that's a very good question. You might want to talk to your therapist about that. Parents, same thing. Sometimes I'll get a parent that will ask me a question. I just want to know what they're thinking. So do I. But that's not why I'm here. And you need to talk to your family's therapist to dig deep in that, because I can't give you that advice. Same thing with, if it comes to legal advice with name changes, I'm going to advise you to speak to an attorney or something of that nature. But I think just listening and really stepping back for a minute and saying, what are our kids really dealing with right now? Because growing up, my parents could very easily, 6 o'clock, we're turning the news on, go to your room and do your homework. Nowadays, kids can turn the iPad on, turn their iPhone on, turn anything on and see that, there was a bombing here, there was a shooting here, they're doing this. I mean, I had to practice for, I almost said elephants, earthquakes when I was in school because I grew up on the West Coast. Nowadays, they're doing drills because if somebody walks in with a high-powered weapon, I can't imagine going to school with that feeling every day of knowing that I walk out of my house and protect, because I'm that person with the anxiety that would walk out and say, somebody's going to bomb my school today. Oh my God. I like that, because we're seeing it. It's being pushed to our faces at all times. Even as adults, we have a hard time shutting that off. As a young adult who's growing and developing, that can really, one, push you to say, you know what, I'm going to go out there and make a change in this world. Or two, this world is frightening and there's so much stuff going, or I'm doing so many things I don't even know what's going on in my own world, let alone everywhere else, because I'm in soccer this season, then I'm in tennis, then I'm in baseball, I'm in debate club, I'm doing this, I'm practicing for SATs, I'm practicing for ACTs, I'm practicing for APs. Now I'm taking all of those exams and I'm filling out applications and I'm writing essays. Like, listen to what we're putting on our youth and let's stop for a minute and think, what is the most important thing that we want them to learn? Resiliency, how to get back up if you do fall. It's inevitable. We've all done it. We're going to do it. How to listen to your teachers, because inevitably you're not going to get something handed in because you didn't listen to them or you didn't read the syllabus. So teaching our youth now how to listen, how to be resilient, how to think on your feet, which again, something that I think we're missing in some places. We tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And then you turn 18, you graduate high school, and we expect in 3 months that you are just going to learn how to do all of this on your own. In addition to maybe coming out, maybe you're transitioning, you're doing all this, and maybe nobody knows except for you, because in your mind, and I can remember very vividly, in my mind, I knew I was different. But because of where I was raised and how I was raised, I knew that it was wrong. So for me, it was, I am different, but I can't tell anybody or even talk to a friend about it because it's wrong. What I want from a student is they to be able to find somebody, one person that they know on campus, off campus, at their high school, that they can be frank with. And they can say, this is what I'm thinking. This is who I'm feeling. And I know that that takes a lot for a student to do. But if we make those areas for them, and I'm going to avoid the safe space, but if we make a place where they feel comfortable and they feel like when they're being heard and listened to, then absolutely they're going to tell us. But we then as adults have to be very careful what we do with that information. If it's they're just telling us, even mom and dad, parents, mom and moms, dad and dads, however your family makeup is, if your child says something to you about them being LGBTQAI plus, non-binary, whatever it might be, unless they specifically say to you, please go tell the rest of the family I'm too nervous to do that. They were telling you, do not go out and out your child under any circumstance unless they have given you that permission.
I was going to say, this is not a Facebook post moment. This is not a, share. No. So, but I think it goes back to that listening thing. And I really love that you brought up the listening part. And I think what you and I understand, but parents may not, is that these are young people that are moving from a state of dependence to a state of independence. And you need to listen and sit down and listen with them. Maybe it's once a week you sit down and you have that college chat about what's going on, or, where do we need to look some new places? Do we need to visit some places? How are your applications going? But block off some time so you can listen to, and also understand that they're going to change. These little, humanoids are trying to figure out themselves. And so I often tell parents, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And so the colleges and the things that your child are interested in when they are 9th, 10th, 11th, even early 12th grade might not be the same place that they end up at the end of this, journey towards the end of senior year, but you've got to listen to them. And so if you're wondering, if you as a parent are questioning if your child is maybe thinking, trying to come out to you or identify as LGBTQAI, listen to them. They might start changing their words that they use. They might, instead of saying, boyfriend or girlfriend, they might say significant other. They might say someone that I'm dating. They might take, a gender neutral approach to it. They might start using different pronouns themselves or talking in more third person pronouns. So stop and listen. And I love the advice you gave of don't ask them, let them have the moment to tell you. So if they are thinking of coming out to you, and whatever that may be, they may come out to you as just like, I don't know what I am, but I don't think I am what I thought I was. So, that might be, they might, remember, some of us grew up loving certain foods and now we hate certain foods, and we ourselves change as humans. That's the beauty of the human existence. So we need to allow our young people the space and the time to process, and we as adults need to take that space and time and listen, because this is a journey. And I think you brought up the social media part, and I wanted to touch on that. Social media makes it look like this is a perfect, easy photographic process. Like, you start senior year, you take your ACT, your SAT, you get a perfect score your first time, you have the great grades, and you find your first college, and the heavens open up and tell you that this is your perfect college, and you should apply early decision, and bada bing, bada boom, you're done. And that may happen on social media, but that's not, I will tell you, I've worked with hundreds of students. That is not how it works, rarely, if ever, in my existence as a counselor. So parents need to stop thinking about how it's supposed to look and enjoy the journey and the process. This is the last time that your young person is going to be around your household on the daily basis, unless they are choosing to live with you after high school, which does happen. Hakuna Matata. But for the, in their, right, in their livelihood, this is going to be the time that you're going to spend the most time with them. So why not make this a pleasant experience? Try and take the stress down, try and enjoy it, listen day by day, moment by moment, and stop stressing so much. Like, it'll be fine. It really will. This is why parents hire people like Scott and I. Our main job is really to tell parents this will be fine. It will be okay. We will get through this one day at a time. Things happen.
And I think for parents, it's letting go of your child. And in that sense, you're not really letting go. What you're doing is that you are you're pushing them out of the nest. You're
Yep.
saying this is the time where you need to go. But to do that, we have to listen, because again, and I'm sure you've had this, I get the parents all the time. My child wants to be a doctor or an accountant, and they want to go to this school, and you sit down and you have the first meeting with the child, and they've failed math tremendously. They hate it. Science is horrible. And you're like, those two things are out. So what is it that you want? Because your parents, I don't think, have actually been catching the clues of what you've been saying, or maybe you just haven't. So it's really that ask and then sit back. And if they don't give you that answer, they will think about it. I assure you, they are going to go back to their room, to their friends, and they're going to be thinking about, okay, the next time that question comes up, what is it that I'm actually kind of looking for? And what will that be?
Yeah. So. Stop trying to put a square peg into a round hole, because it's just going to cause all the stress and anxiety and make your whole experience with your teenager absolutely miserable. So slow down, take it day by day, listen to your kid, and it'll be much better. So for parents and counselors that are listening, especially for students who are maybe gender nonconforming or identifying as transgender, it's really confusing as to where to begin this whole thing, because that's an extra layer that might make things a little bit more difficult. So what are one or two things that you think parents and counselors need to be thinking of when they're first starting this college search process with a student who identifies as transgender or gender nonconforming?
So the first thing that I would do is make very sure, just again, I want to reiterate this, is that they have specifically said to you that they identify as LGBTQI plus non-binary, somewhere on that, before you just assume and start making those things, whether you're a parent or a counselor, because I've seen that happen. Johnny, we know he's gay. He's going to come out at some point. Well, he hasn't. So then Johnny is just straight little Johnny too. The place for me that I start this with every student, let's just start looking at colleges, because most of the time they don't even know what to look for. So let's look at different sized campuses. Let's look at different geographic locations. You said you hate the snow. We're looking at all New England campuses. Let me show you some that are out here. Well, okay, I like the snow because I want to be able to ski, but I don't know. Okay. And then it's almost like this blooming onion. You peel back the layers and you start to really see, what are they looking for? And as professionals, we can start tying things together. But really at the very beginning, unless I have a student, and even if I have a student who comes in that says, I want to go to these campuses, I've toured, they look great, perfect. Then we don't need to discuss these right now. What I want you to do is I want you to take a look at these other schools that have your major, or that have different clubs that you've mentioned that you're interested in, and things that are going to give you more than just the academics, because the schools that you've picked, you're going to get great academics. But having known you now for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, it may not be a good fit for you socially, just the type of students, the rigor, that you don't want to be somebody who's a competitive person, but you're looking at, a Harvard Business School where you're going to be, it's competitive. You have to maintain certain things or you're not going to be there. So it's really the first thing to do. Let's just start looking at campuses. Let's start, or even less than that. Where do you want to go to school? Do you want to stay home? Do you want to move away from home? Do you want to go to college? Let's even start with that question, because some students might say yes. And then I say, why? And I'm not questioning you, but I want to know what their thought. Why do you want to go to college? Like, what is it? Because you're being told that's what you have to do? And again, that probably for most of us, that's what you do after high school, is you go to college. So really just from the fundamental basis of it, let's start just looking and seeing what is out there. And then we start narrowing down on the processes and the policies. And the reason that I do it that way, before I would do it, like, let's look for schools that are LGBTQ friendly right off the bat. That's not as easy to do nowadays, because those things have been getting cut from campuses because of the federal government and getting risk of the finances being stripped. So now it's, where do you want to go to school? Like, what do you like? Tropical areas? Do you like mountainous areas? And then from there, let's start looking at some of these campuses that you might look into. And inevitably, if you're, young person begs, I want to go to a Big Ten school. I want to be where there's a major football team. And okay, why? I want that tailgame aspect of thing, tailgame. I want to have big classes. I don't want my teachers to know who I am. I want to be able to get lost in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, that's great. And now this student might be one of the students that I know, you know what? You'll be able to get lost, but still get your work done, do the things that you need to do, and grow as an individual because you have that drive and the ability to kind of go and do that. Other students, we're going to start, but they may not have that fortitude. I keep going back to that word. I don't know why. But to say, I want to go here because they have this great program that's also, in addition to my academics, they're going to help me flourish in this honors XYZ program that I'm going to do. So for the right off the bat, I would say is let's make this, start it off fun. Do not start this process off as stressful because that's just going to make it go from there forward. Like, let's have fun. If you could go anywhere you wanted to go to school in any country, in any world, where? Any world? Did I just say that? Any country, any state, where let's talk about that. And then we'll narrow it down. We live in a time where if you want to go to school in the UK or in Canada or in Italy, somewhere in the EU, there are colleges that are affordable, that will work with you, and that will also provide the same levels of support for LGBTQI plus students. There are other factors, obviously, you have to take into account, just traveling and things of that nature. But let's not.
And I was going to say, I have a whole episode on applying to the UK. So if those of you who are listening want to apply to the UK, go check out my interview with another independent educational consultant, Terry, who really talked about that whole process. I love that you dive in. I always equate this to, students wanting to go buy a new pair of shoes and they want to do something very different, or maybe they're getting an outfit for homecoming or prom. A lot of times you just go to the store and you just start trying stuff on. And
absolutely,
the college search sometimes has to start that way. So go to the college that's closest to you. I know the likelihood of you going to that one is probably low because you're like, I'm not going to be that close to my family, so I need to go farther away. Go there, do that tour, and then come back and tell me, what did you like? What did you not like? What would you change? What would you do different? Because we're asking our teenagers where do you want to go to college? But they've never had it. It's like saying, what type of sushi do you like? Well, if I've never had sushi, I can't tell you what I like.
So I'm probably going to tell you none of it because it's raw fish. And why would I eat raw fish? Like, that's
right. But it's the same thing with college. The only thing that a lot of the teenagers know about college is what, again, they've seen on social media, which we know is not accurate. It's just showing, the football games. You never see a classroom on some of these social media accounts. It's always the social events. Anyway, but go to your local college and take a tour. They offer tours almost every day of the week. Again, go see what it's like. And then when you get back in the car, not right away say, hey, what did you think? Take a drive, go back home, do something else, and later ask them, what do you remember about that college experience? What stuck out, positive, negative, and then help them talk about it. But yeah, they need to just explore, start somewhere.
I think that gives you that baseline sort of like, okay, for my local students, I'll say, go to UConn. That's a big school. Check it out. Go on a tour there. It's not what you want based off what you're telling me, but go look at it. See if there's something you like. They have the major you want, but see it. And then we can use that. And then I also have smaller liberal arts colleges that they'll look at too. But it's that way of just go. Like I said, go to the car. For me, it's cars. Go to the car dealership.
Right.
And try them
test drive.
See what they're like. Go for a test drive. So if you're at a college, see if you could take a class. Like, just sit in on one for a couple of minutes. Usually if you call, they can make that happen sometimes. Not every college is going to allow that. There's ways you can do that. So yeah, just go and experience it, and then don't start bombarding them with questions when they get in the car.
No.
Give them time to actually decompress what they saw. And again, we all know kids. Most of them will just start saying things probably that you don't even want to hear, but they will say things. And that's a good way to really start this. Like, what did you like? What did you not like? And then that's a way we can start looking at other colleges. Okay, you didn't like 300 kids in a lecture hall. This school, you're going to be in that for the first 2 years. So let's talk about that and going forward to that.
I know we could talk for hours, but we are running out of time. I did want to bring up the fact that not only are you an independent educational consultant, but you also do a lot of executive functioning coaching and helping students understand how to make things happen, executive functioning wise. I know you've been working with a few of my students. So why don't you just take a moment and help parents and counselors understand a little bit what is executive functioning and how do you help students and parents with that process?
So I love to travel as my big thing. So I use a lot of anecdotes about different cars and traveling. So what I will say to a parent about executive functioning is think of this as your brain's air traffic control system. It's not about intelligence. It's about managing your time, tasks, emotions, and expectations. And let's be honest, most of our students there are overloaded. So specifically when we're dealing with LGBTQI plus students, and I'll use the trans students specifically in this case. If you have a student or a young adult who maybe they have ADHD and they have some executive function decisions that they have to make, in addition to looking at colleges, we also have to now take into account that have you been giving them their hormones every morning, or did they have to go and find them and get them and do them? Because what I will find sometimes is student goes to college, specifically ADHD meds, they didn't not want to take them. They didn't because they weren't at the breakfast table where mom and dad leave them every morning.
Right.
So learning how to do that for yourself, task initiation, time management, knowing how to really break these things down. And again, for trans students, you're going to have doctor's appointments, therapy appointments that you'll have to maintain and be able to manage that with a class schedule and potentially a work schedule, because let's face it, college is not cheap these days. We know this. Students are potentially going to have to work. So how do we teach them to manage all of this when they're also struggling with an ADHD, or maybe they're on the spectrum a little bit and there's some things that we need to really work with. So for the work that I do with my students, it's because it's so complex as far as the different student and where we are with the student. There are many different things, but I think most adults need some executive function help, to be honest with you, as far as our time management and our organization, our emotional regulation and things of that nature. But it's really helping students, and I think understand that you're dealing with this constant stress. You're dealing with constant decision-making fatigue. Everything you do every day is a decision that is overwhelming for the best of us. How do we manage that? And as a student, how do you show them this is the most important thing to get done? You still have to get this done, but right now, this is the priority. How do they break that down? I mean, that takes us, some of us as adults still don't have the ability to do that perfectly. And in college, there are a lot of different moving parts that we need to work with. So for me, it's also, and we could do a whole other podcast on that if you want, but it's really learning strategies, and maybe we will, is learning strategies and techniques that will help you make sense out of everything that you have to do. And that is, sometimes it's literally just don't look at the big picture. What do you have to get done tomorrow in your 4 classes? Let's look at your syllabus, break that down into manageable chunks and get that done. And I assure you, mom and dad, don't say this to your child because it comes off as being a parent, but we all know that they have time in their day when they get to college. There will be time for them to sit down and figure out their schedule. But in their mind, they don't have the time because they're in classes, they have to eat, they have to go to a party, they have to go hang out with their friends, they've got to go to sports, they've got to do all this. And then when you sit down and realize, if you break this up and actually did this, you would have more time to be able to go out and do the things you need to do. Practical and personalized is really how it comes down to for me, is just breaking things down into micro steps, create routines, reduce mental load. And one of the things I've been building in now when I'm working with students is I want them to take 30 minutes and put every electronic they own away or down, just out of sight. Go outside. I don't care if it's snowing, put on warm clothes, take your Apple Watch off, whatever it is, just let go of the technology and go look at a leaf, look at the snow, take 30 minutes so your brain can just stop.
Yep.
That's some of the best advice I can give.
Well, and speaking of stopping, we're probably going to have to stop this podcast soon. So before we do, I wanted to give you a moment as Scott to share a soapbox. You've given us a lot of advice and helped us with navigating this whole process, transition while transitioning. I really love that you provide these resources for families. You offer college counseling, life coaching, career advising. You're really kind of a one-stop shop for a whole bunch of different things. But I wanted to give you a moment to share, one or two words of wisdom. We don't have a ton of time, but one or two words of wisdom as your parting thoughts for those who are listening or watching on the video.
All right. So this one I wrote down because I knew that we were going to be running out of time by the time I got here. So one piece of advice that I would like to give, whether you're a parent, student, or an educator listening, and this ties into what I do as a professional in my business. See the entire human sitting in front of you. That is what I do. Nothing that I do in my business is in group work. We don't sit down and do essays together. We don't build lists together. It's individualized for each individual child, student, or adult that I'm working with. I recognize that people work best when they feel supported and not judged. So when I'm working with families and students, I'm not seeing that there's a one size fits all. We can shift outcomes. I'm looking at this from, and how it generally starts with me is with all of those different things. I'll work with the family on the college process, but in that process, we either might find maybe a trade is a better aspect. So we will navigate. I use what I call it's the MAP assessment. I use it on a very high level aspect, but it lets students know, like, you wouldn't be good sitting in a desk type of a job. You use your hands. That's something you would. So let's look at careers. Let's look at educations that might be more hands-on schools. I am really looking this at a holistic piece. So for my business, I might say to a parent, you know what, they're going to do great, but they need some work in executive functioning, or their ADHD is something that I've been noticing, and it might cause a problem when they get there. You might want to have talk to your therapist, whatever it might be, address this with your child. Because again, I don't get into diagnostics, but you might see that, all right, this young man, we have a 10-minute time span where we can get work done and they need to go. So for me, I look at every child and family differently. The dynamics are different from every family. But just seeing the person that's in front of me on screen, and I work with kids all over the world. So it's literally, I do a lot, but I don't take a large caseload. I keep it manageable so that I get to know every one of my students. I know their families by the back of my hand. I know what makes them click, what makes them shut down. And really just, as I tell families, you're probably going to hate the fact, but I'm going to be like part of your family by the time we're done, because I may know more about your young adult than you do because of the relationship that we have built, because they're looking at a place where they're going to go to be an adult. And again, we say 18 years old, you can go sign up and fight for this country and die for this country. Great. But does anybody ever talk to you about what that actually would look like? Well, the same thing with college. You have the ability to go to college and do this, but we need to talk to you about what the long-term outcomes are as well, because most of you are probably going to come out with debt. So there's a lot of different things. So, I mean, we even bring that into afterwards, like, what do you want to do with a degree in English, a bachelor's degree? What is the next step? And not from a judging way, like, let's talk about this. Where do you see yourself in grad school, PhDs, whatever it might be? We'll talk about that. Let's just get your bachelor's right now. But it's something to start thinking about as we go through. And again, one last thing that I also wanted to throw out there. If you are working with your child, or your counselor, you're working with a student who's LGBTQAI+, one of the biggest things, the question I always get is, when do I need to tell somebody on campus? It depends what you're doing. If it is a housing concern, you let residential life know. That stays with residential life. It doesn't need to go to anybody else. They will work with you. But families also keep in mind, just because you want a single bedroom, there are limited numbers of them on campus. You have got to get paperwork filled in immediately. We used to say that you could fill out a paperwork, and because you are trans and you need, for whatever reason, your own room, that can get a little dicey now. And so we have to be very careful of what we do. But that is something that I would say, be very careful who you tell right now, and who are the people that really need to know for your safety moving forward in this process. And that might just be different departments that have very specific things to do with the student life, but we will walk through that and navigate that process as well. I'm going to stop now. Sorry.
Scott,
That's that.
it was great having you on. I really appreciate all of the advice you've given. We probably could go on for hours, and we'll probably do some future podcasts to talk about executive functioning, gender neutral housing, all sorts of other things that we could address. But I really appreciate your time and for you being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. As you can see, I'm passionate about this work, as we all are. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask Chuck, ask myself. If you go onto my website, all my contact information is there. One thing, if you download the book, please check your spam folder. For some reason, sometimes it does get sent there because it's coming from my website. So if you download it, it should come instantly. Just checking your junk box. And for some reason you're having an issue, email me and I'll just send you a PDF of it.
There you go. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today, but fear not, we will be back next week with more tips and tricks to help you conquer the college application process like a boss. Until then, remember, don't chuck it up.